All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of Scoutcast. My name is Rolf Zuid and I'm your host. It is a dream of many software engineers, myself included, to develop something, maybe as a side project, and then see that project gain traction. It gets adopted, downloaded a bunch of times, and maybe you even get to speak on it during some conventions. For our guest today, this has happened, and much more things since then as well. He built a framework which enables teams to develop applications using domain-driven design, event sourcing, and CQRS. This framework in turn led to the founding of a new company, AxonIQ, in 2017, and with it a whole end-to-end development and infrastructure platform for smoothly evolving event-driven microservices focused on CQRS and event sourcing. It's a lot of technical mumbo-jumbo here, but he's going to explain everything to you guys. So joining us today is Allard Buijze, CEO and founder, together with Jeroen Spekenbrink of AxonIQ. Allard strongly believes that sharing knowledge and vision is the best way to make progress. When you share the knowledge, you hand over what you have to the next generation of developers, giving you the opportunity to move on and learn more. I quote, "You can only grab something if your hands are empty." Although software development and research take up most of his time, he does like to dedicate some of his remaining time to tennis as a nice way to get rid of excess energy. I know that he has children and his own company and all that kind of stuff, so I don't know where he gets this excess energy, but maybe he has some secrets for us. We will be talking with Allard about his journey from developing stuff in his spare time to ultimately becoming a CTO of his own startup, flying all over the world, talking about his products. Welcome, Allard. It's nice to have you on the show here.
Thank you, Rolf. That's a very elaborate introduction. I'd almost say nothing to add, but
yeah. Did you like it, or do you think it was too much?
No, it's it summarizes the past what is it, probably 12 years.
Yeah.
Very nicely. So yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, welcome. And I'm also joined by two regulars, of course. Sylvester, how is it going?
Very well, thank you.
You
looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, you actually introduced me to Axon Framework back in the day, so yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, almost 10 years ago, I think.
Well, maybe not that long, but definitely almost. Yeah.
Yeah, Rolf is 9 years at First Scout, so
Almost 10. Almost 10. I round up.
And Heek, welcome. How are you going? How is it going?
pretty good, man. Thanks. And I have a disclaimer to make it. Allard used to be my boss, so
yeah. I was actually going to ask you this, right? Because you have a history with Allard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, he also introduced me to event sourcing, CQRS, and all this. No surprise there, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's kick it off. So, Allard, how did the idea of Axon framework came to be?
Yeah, so we'll have to go back a few years for that, and it started when I can go all the way to the beginning. When I was 6, my parents bought a computer. I think that's where things start.
Okay.
But I'll skip forward a few decades from there. So just to share my age, I got a Commodore 64, and then you can use Google to calculate how old that would make me.
Yeah, I used to have one as well, man, with a tape deck. Actually.
Yeah, me too. We didn't have the money for the actual floppy disk reader. I don't know if that really matters a lot in speed of loading things. You just had to wait for ages, and then you could play a small game. And before long, I got a few books. So by the time I could read, I would just copy the little programs that were in the books into my Commodore 64, and wait a couple of hours, and you could play your little game. So those were pretty cool days. Fast forward a long time. I was working on a project or a couple of projects at J-Team, where I was employed at the time. And being an architect, I was technically responsible for the projects that we did. And I noticed that every project, just the complexity of the solution was higher than the complexity of the problem, right? And that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right when you solve a problem and your solution is more complex than the problem you had. And while it solves the problem, which is amazing, you typically need to evolve that product further as new problems come about or companies need to shift direction. Yeah. So I was really looking for a different way to build software. And then I went to a training course by Eric Evans in 2008 with a colleague. I actually flew to New York, because it was actually cheaper to go to New York and do the training there than to go to Oslo and do the training, or London. There was actually a little discount in New York, and that discount was so high that flying there was cheaper.
Yeah.
But I don't mind, right? At the time, that was a normal thing to do, right? To spend a few hours in an aircraft, and that training did change a lot of my views and the things of how to build software, and it made a lot of sense, right? Doing domain-driven design, if you get into it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just make sure that all that woolly language that people tend to use when talking about it, just disregard that completely. I like to keep my feet on the ground. So then I started applying that in projects, and that was a breeze, right?
Yeah. But
then this one moment came again where this one requirement came in, and complexity exploded again. And I thought, okay, this is the right way, but not the whole right way.
Yeah.
And that's when I started experimenting with a concept that's nowadays called CQRS, which I think at the time was called distributed domain-driven design, something like that. And I started playing around with it. Asked my boss for time. Yes, Enrique, at the time I had a boss too. He said, yeah, you can spend a day a week to explore, and then we'll talk in a few weeks. Give us an update and write a blog about it and things like that.
Yeah.
So I started writing some code, and I thought, okay, I'm going to build this demo application, right? This I think it was probably order management. I don't even remember what I was thinking of building, because I actually never got to build anything.
He gave you like
I
2
only
weeks
built
outside of the whole work, like you had just 2 weeks free of practicing this.
No. Basically, I had 1 day a week for a couple of weeks in a row. So I was really looking forward to the Fridays, because I always blocked the Fridays to do that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And what you notice is that then Monday through Thursday become these days where you just plow through them, right, to get to that Friday where you can go and do the cool stuff. So I started playing around with different concepts, like, okay, event sourcing. How does that work? What do you need? And I implemented something, and it didn't work at all. And then I read the specifications of what is event sourcing, and then I noticed I wasn't doing the right thing. I was replaying my commands, right, my instructions. So I had a hard time figuring out, where do we do validation and where do we do just accept it as a fact that we had from the past.
Yeah.
So I made these really stupid mistakes, and then I built something that had a few less mistakes. And I started to like it. I started to feel like there's something, there's this feeling you get that you haven't solved the problem, but you have the feeling that this is the way towards the solution. So I got a few more weeks, and then a few more weeks, and I played around with it, and started sharing my code on Google Code in SVN, because nobody heard of Git. And then at some point, we moved to GitHub, and then a company in France started using it in production. Right, just my little library of code that I had created that had my examples of, if you want to do event sourcing, you need all this stuff, and it seems to be independent of any use case that you have in mind, because I can't even remember what the exact use case was, because all the code was generic anyway, and they used it and went into production.
That's interesting, right? Because the idea was because you had like a problem that came exponentially complex in terms of like design or the software at least, and then you said like, okay, let me see if I can write something to reduce this complexity. But then you don't end up using it yourself. First, a different company actually uses it for you first to smooth out all the bugs. I
didn't even call it a framework at the time. I called it a little library of experimentation or whatever. Right? It's this really dangerous stuff, and it had beware things all over. And they use it. And the fun thing is, if you the type of project is not one that you would expect being the first mover. So this was a company that built software for surgeons to track the tools they used in surgery, right? Okay. So I don't know. That's not where you would expect your. And I remember when I got an email from them first, and they said, we wanted to let you know that we're using your framework in production, which is 2 items of news. First of all, apparently it's a framework, and secondly, it's production ready.
And did you call it Axon?
And my reply, sorry?
And did you already call it Axon, or what did you call it?
I think at the time we did call it Axon, yeah, because we did have a feeling that there was more to it. And when we moved from Google Code to GitHub, we also saw that as an opportunity to change the name. So we had a little quiz in the company, and I remember I just saw colleagues standing next to a whiteboard. And while I was working on my own spot, I saw them debating like what the best term for the framework would be, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
But like, did you build it alone? Because when you say like we decided the name, there was also like more people helping you out, or was more like just sparring with you sometimes and.
Mostly that. So we had discussion groups internally to discuss the ideas and make sure that you want to validate your ideas sometimes. Right?
Yeah.
And I was basically the only one really building the stuff, experimenting with it.
And so after... go ahead.
How did you come up with the name Axon?
So actually, Dennis de Boer came up with that one. He's a famous he's a famous soccer player, but not that one. It's of course a different one. No, actually, so one of my colleagues came up with the name, and we were looking a bit he was looking into in the medical domain, like what kind of terms do you have there, and maybe that's what inspired the surgical application to use it, but. An axon is a part of a neuron that transports messages from one cell to the next, right? So basically, you've got axons in your body to make sure that whenever you think I need to move the muscle actually moves. That electrical signal that gets transported goes through axons, and that's where the name came from. And we wanted something short. And if you look up axon on Wikipedia, you'll find. That a neuron has a lot of these components, and none of them would make for a very good name of a framework. So that's it's quite. We were actually looking for a different name. We wanted some part of the brain that has long-term memory, but I think that's called the front lobe. But yeah, calling a framework front lobe, it didn't quite get enough votes.
But then it's in Java, right? So just say J front lobe. That would be better.
J front lobe. Yeah, we could have done that. Yeah. Actually, thinking of it, that would make the company Front Lobe IQ, right?
And so after this French company contacted you that they're using it in production, how long did it take for other projects or other people to start picking it up?
Well, funny enough, that company gave me the confidence that maybe I should be looking for the next project and use it in a project myself.
Okay.
So we had a bit of a discussion internally to make sure that everybody was aware of the signals that would make a good project. And it didn't take long, fortunately, for actually 2 projects almost simultaneously to come in. One was an online a platform for playing bridge online, which is the card game bridge, and you could play for money. The company doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, not because of the technical platform.
I hope
that's what they promised me, and the other company still exists, which is also a electronic medical record.
But like the guys who used the first version of Axon, do they still use Axon?
Yeah, they're still on it. I'm not sure if they're on Axon 4, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them use Axon 3 as well. Yeah. So they moved on with time, that gave me the confidence to start using it in those projects, and that's where things really go fast, because you encounter the little intricate nuances and annoying things in a framework. Yeah. Especially if you build it yourself and you're going to use it. Right, eat your own dog food is very important, because then you really notice how hard it is. But of course, you still get some form of tunnel vision, right, where you only solve the problems that you encounter and using the solutions that you think are best.
Yeah. And what made you decide to just upload the source up to GitHub? You mentioned because as you said, you got time from your boss. So I would assume that the code was also owned by the company that you were working for at the time, and not a whole lot of companies, especially back then, actually open sourced their work. So what made you publish all the source code for Axon?
Yeah, so actually that was company policy.
Okay.
So the company that I worked for, J-Team, and it's been acquired by Trifork in 2012. But J-Team was part of the founding of SpringSource at the time, or Interface 21 as it was called. So half of J-Team at the very beginnings actually joined the Spring team to build up that company. So they were very much familiar with open source and the mechanisms, let's say, of how to use open source to your advantage. And J-Team, as well as Trifork, who now acquired it, they are consultancy firms, right? So they used it as a way to market themselves. Effectively, I mean, in the end, that's there has to be some economics, right? It can't all be just people having fun. And it actually worked quite well because you go to conferences, you talk about whatever you talk about, but you will either wear a T-shirt from the company or there's a little logo in the corner. Right? It still reflects on the company that the speaker belongs to. So that's basically part of it. So it was licensed Apache 2 because we knew that license. It's very liberal, very free in that sense, but of course, it does make it difficult to build a commercial engine around it. I guess you can ask the people from Elastic how tricky that could be. Yeah.
And before we move to the next phase of Axon, what are you still how to say, without kids, married? What was your situation as a developer?
Yeah, so back then, Axon was my kid, but in the time, so my kids are now 6 and 9. So yeah, I had a few years head start before the kids came in and started to demand some requirements to my lifestyle.
Yeah. So also meant that you probably also did not only work on Fridays on Axon. I'm assuming, right? In the evenings, correct. You probably and weekends was your time was definitely
exactly. So my wife would have some time for TLC and whatever pro shows that she would like watching, and I would be on the side, at the kitchen table, just developing some stuff in Axon. Yeah. And it was, it was new stuff, so that really motivated me to play around with it. So I spent a lot of time, privately building it.
And did you already back then had this idea in the back of your head, maybe I could make this into my own company, or was it still I just want to build something cool that people use?
No, it did occur to me a few times. So back then. My boss was, when I started, Steven Schuurman, or not in the very beginning, but a little bit later on, Steven Schuurman, one of the founders of Elastic, was my boss. And he of course did the whole SpringSource thing once, so he knows that you can build a business around open source. And then in 2011, Elastic split off from J-Team at the time. I have to get my name straight because the Trifork acquisition was right after they split out of J-Team. I had been working on Axon for over a year when it was in the framework stage, right? So you see that kind of thing happening twice around you, and it does start this. Hey, maybe I could do the same thing. And I remember having a conversation with Steven Schuurman at the time. And I remember him saying, when I give frameworks 1 in a 10 million chance to succeed, I'll give yours 1 in 10,000.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, that's
impressive.
like saying it's not going to happen, but it's less likely not going to happen as in most other frameworks, right?
Yeah.
So But I guess we're a bit closer to one in just a few rather than. But yeah, let's not skip all the way to the end. Right now. Yeah.
And because the question I have in my head, because I also never spoke to you about it, but because I understand a little bit of the part of Axon. But then you are a developer, and then you are an architect, then you build your framework, and eventually you actually became the CTO of the company. And how does that transition goes? One day you are just an architect,
transition, yeah.
And then you're just like, now you are a CTO, go for it.
Yeah, well, that was really weird, and it happened to me. It just happened to me. The funny thing is, at the time, we were expecting our twins. So the 6-year-olds are twins, boy and a girl. Don't ask me how I survived that. But we were expecting those, and I remember sitting at I was working at the customer, not far from my house. I would go there on my bike, which is really nice, and then I would get a meeting request for the CEO and CTO. They want to come pay a visit, and they were coming to the customer site. And I was like, why the hell would them two, right? Yeah. Normally one of them would come and say, hey, let's have a chat, or let's meet halfway, or whatever. No, they're fired. Both of them, yeah. Actually, I thought, what did I do? Is it something I said or something I didn't say, maybe, or whatever? The project's successful? I mean, what? I don't see the problem, right? So what else could it be? Then they told me, like, I was the first to hear that our CTO was leaving the company, and they were asking me if I wanted to be a successor, and they gave me 24 hours to think about it.
Wow!
Because there was a bit of some tricky situation going on.
Very hostile, right? Like this. Movies.
And I think it was somewhere, I don't know, a Tuesday or something like that. And then the next morning I had to fly to Oslo for a conference. So I remember I just had that evening to talk about it with my wife. The wife that is carrying twins, and emotions can go all ways in that stage. So I also asked the CTO, like, why are you leaving, right? Because, well, it was news. He wanted to spend some time with his upcoming baby. I was like, wait a minute. So you're dropping your position as a CTO because you're expecting a baby.
Just one.
So your best candidate is one that's expecting twins. Right? That's how does that compute? Yeah. What are you expecting me to become some sort of a superhero? Well, anyway. And the next morning I had to get up early. You can imagine I didn't sleep very well. So you take your flight to Oslo, and then you have your conference. You're on the phone with your boss / soon to be peer, to discuss what ifs and the babies, and I'm not. It's going to be stressful, and I don't know how I got through it, but in the beginning you just. Whatever happens, it happens. I don't know if you guys have children, but you'll just learn to take things as they come, right? Don't
just ride the wave, man.
Ride the wave. Yeah, if it goes left, you go left. You just gently push it until it goes right again. That's the way you go.
But like on that time, you had no also already thinking like, if I get this position, I cannot continue with Axon, or there was more like, no, this is the way to go. Axon was growing, but it was not really like on the top of your mind as a business yet.
Well, no, at the time, actually, we were, the customer I was working at, they were using Axon as well. And at that time, I think close to half of the revenue that we were making as a group was from Axon-related projects. So it was already clear that Axon was going to be part of my job.
And that was Axon 2 or Axon 3 already?
Yes, I don't know, somewhere around that time.
Yeah.
Maybe the transition. Actually, think about it. No, it was probably Axon 2 still. Yeah, and then the transition to 3 was during my time as CTO. And I had to learn to delegate, right? Make sure that other people could do it as well. So actually, Axon 3 was mainly built by somebody else. or at least the transition from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And that's when things got a bit bigger and bigger slowly, until most of my time was spent either CTOing or being active in large projects, and those would use Axon as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Impressive. So you were working on Axon, had twins, and became a CTO.
Yeah, that was. Okay. But the advantage is kids go to bed early. So I remember coming home, and I would have a drive from Amsterdam to The Hague, where I live, which is around, depending on traffic, could be 45 minutes drive. So those were my 45 minutes of calm and music. And then I remember opening that door to our house, and my wife would sit on the couch because it was usually feeding time for the twins. So she would have she would sit with one foot on one knee, so that you get this sort of bowl where one kid laid, and then the other one in her arm, and then the bottles like crossing your arms to put the bottles in both mouths, and she would have that face like "help me" when I would walk in, right? So
your turn.
Yeah, my turn. Well, probably looking at the stove, like somebody needs to start cooking. So then it was rush hour again. And sometimes if I had energy left, I would build something. But it's, Rolf, you already, how do you have excess energy at the end?
Exactly.
I believe there's different types of energy. So kids, they very quickly drain a very specific type of energy. And then there's a complete imbalance of energy levels in your body, and you need to do something physical. Yeah. So the best thing apparently is to not do them on the kids. So I tend to hit a ball or whatever.
It's a better idea. Yeah.
And then there's mental. You have to drain that as well during the day, and that's where Axon helped. So I could balance those.
But didn't that put a strain on your relationship or marriage with your wife? Because like I can imagine spending a lot of time at work, and then all the kids, and then at night I might even go tennising or even more programming. Like maybe sometimes you just want to hang out with your spouse, right?
Yeah, well, fortunately there's 7 days a week, so yeah, we could. We always did that on Wednesdays.
Oh, okay. No. She found a spot in your agenda.
Sometimes you just have to accept that, no Axon today, and it was also better. I think it's a very healthy thing not to do everything every day over and over and keep on going and going, because a burnout is. It's quickly gotten, but to get rid of it is slightly more difficult.
So up till this point, Axon was still like a Trifork thing, I guess. But at one point, I guess you guys started talking about, okay, can we maybe form a company around this? Like how does those discussions spark? Oh, and
I do have a question before that, because we're moving to the next phase, because just before this is... So you mentioned a few times conferences, right? So I'm imagining that you are mostly going there to, talk about Axon, or you join them just to talk about, or not talk about, or just join them. Or my question is, did you market it, Axon, when you started with it, Axon 1, Axon 2, or you just actually went to conference and speak about it?
So I just went to conferences and spoke about the concepts, the underlying concepts. And my idea was to share what you know, so that people could comment and tell you, hey, I know that stuff as well, and here's something you can learn from me. And that happened as well, right? I mean, if you go to conferences, there's going to be people there that have a lot more experience than you do, so you get a lot of interesting feedback. And I've been to conferences as a speaker, as well as, way before that, of course, as just an attendee, so to say. And the dynamics you get from a conference as a speaker are completely different. So first of all, because you've been on stage, people have seen you on stage, and they will, fortunately, very often just approach you and start a discussion about your topic. And of course, that's a topic you care about. So you love to talk about that, which is a hidden recommendation to everybody listening right now. If you go to a conference and you see a speaker and you have a question, just go ask that question. They love to talk about that subject, because that's why they're there, because they love to talk about it. Nobody really likes to be on stage, because we would have been actors otherwise. But we just love to talk about our subjects, and that gave me a lot of feedback. And looking at, I actually recently found my first presentation about CQRS, and I was like, oh god, did I really do that?
Look back.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
No, this was fortunately in a time where it was not very common yet to record all of the conference talks.
Right.
Yeah, so lucky
I'd love
me.
to see that.
But could you share it? Because I think they would be
No, I
great.
had some technical issues when I tried to. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, clear. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So most definitely when all this happened, like I said, it was all part of Trifork still, I imagine. And then at one point you guys, or I don't know if it was you or someone else, started talking about, hey, can we maybe form, like, is it a daughter company or totally, unrelated company around this product? How did this thing start?
So I don't remember exactly how it started and who did the first, let's say, approach in that case. But I had, of course, I had a lot of discussions with the Trifork CEO at the time, and his name might sound familiar, Jeroen.
Yep.
We had some discussions around Axon, and it was being adopted quite a lot, and I was literally flying across the planet to talk about it, and I would get invited to talk about Axon at a conference. So there was really a lot of interest in the product, and meanwhile the number of downloads per month had gone up significantly. I think we had around 30,000 downloads a month at the time, which we thought, at the time was amazing and a lot.
Pretty good, right? Yeah.
So we started talking about, okay, how can we commercialize this? And Trifork already had this this way of working where you do projects, you find what kind of problems you're solving again and again, build a product out of it, and then see if that product can have a life of its own. Yeah. And spin off that product and make a separate company out of it, because a product company has to be managed differently than a project company.
Yeah.
And where a product company is, for example, the strategy has to be much more long-term. Whereas with consultancy, you have to be, usually you're looking at much nearer term. You need to make sure that your people are doing the right types of projects and that you have something to follow up, etc.
Yeah.
So the kind of problems you're faced with are very different, and doing both just makes them too many problems to solve. Yeah. So we did that, and so Trifork was actually used to spinning out product companies.
Okay.
But in this case, I wasn't quite comfortable just saying, "Hey, let's spin out a separate company, and I'll just go, become an employee of that company." And no, I wanted to own that other company. Right? I was like, "Yeah,
of course,
Axon is my thing," and so we had some discussions about it, Jeroen and I, and later on also the group CEO from Trifork. And basically, we had a choice: like, are we going to do it with Trifork, or the other option is against them? And we thought, well, let's not do that. Let's friendly, work with them. And yeah exactly. So we co-founded the company with Trifork. They completely understood that we had been spending private time on it as well, and that we needed to have ownership of that, or at least for a very good part of it. So we really co-founded the company. In the very beginning, Trifork gave us all the means that we needed all the time. Incorporating a company takes a lot of time. It only takes half an hour to go to the Chamber of Commerce and get it registered. But if you want to do it properly, so we had to go to the notary, make sure that everything was arranged for the right way. And they were very helpful. We used all the resources of the company of Trifork to get it started, and that really gave us a very smooth start, and it didn't feel scary. We had a little seed investment at the time to pay for a few months' salary, and through our connections, we went to VCs to talk about getting an investment, which is. Which wasn't very easy, but was definitely a it's a very interesting thing to do. I would almost recommend. I know they're very short on time always, but I would really recommend everybody who has an idea talk to investors, because they and a lot of them actually, because they have really good ideas, they have really good visions, but they're always relatively narrow in the sense that you have to fit their plan. So if they say no, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. It just means that the idea doesn't fit their way of investing.
Doesn't fit their priorities.
On that time, was Axon already like, because you had a framework and the downloads were growing, but did you guys already had like any, like the Axon server or any commercial thing of Axon, or was not there yet?
No, so we had some ideas. So what we did before incorporating the company, of course, when you found a company, you need to not only have an idea, or in our case, even a product. Mm-hmm. You also need to know how to get it to market, right? How to sell it, essentially.
Yeah, like a business plan, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the problem is open source is very easy to sell, but it doesn't make you a lot of money because it's just free, right?
No.
Yeah. So commercially, it's not very interesting. But we started asking our users or our downloaders, the one that we could identify because they made themselves known through the forum, and some would contact us. Actually, ThoughtWorks did a very big project for a large bank in the US, and they contacted us, and we did some consultancy and training with them. And we started asking all those people, what are you using Axon for, and what are the problems that you're encountering when implementing Axon at the scale that you're doing it? And what we noticed was, first of all, they were using it mainly for the very important business processes, basically the core of a business. So in this bank, they were using it for all of the processes that involved credit cards. So all the credit card payments in the US. Credit card applications, right? The whole process of physically getting a card to their customers, etc. So a very important process. But the challenges were, when we use it at scale, we have a problem with all the messaging between all of these microservices. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that that works properly. And it's a lot of work to get all the open source components configured the right way. Yeah. And the other problem is, if we use event sourcing, we generate a lot of data. We generate all of these events, and we're storing all of the events because they carry a lot of value.
Yep.
But storage gets slower over time as you store more data, or the system gets slower over time, where usually businesses want things to go faster over time. Yep. So, and we thought, okay, but those are two ops problems. So first of all, we have a primary process at a business, and we have a problem in operations. That's where the budget is, right? In operations, and definitely in the primary processes. So let's see if we can build solutions for these two problems. And that's the idea we had. We actually already started building the first prototypes in Trifork time, which was part of the spinning off and the services that Trifork would provide to this new company. And that showed that, yes, we can build something that stores events and doesn't go slower over time, etc. So yeah, we started building our first proof of concept. So we had something of a product, not in sellable state, but at least to go to investors and not completely empty-handed.
Yeah. And while you guys made this company, you said something about salaries and stuff. Did you actually also get personnel from Trifork? And did you have to recruit them yourself?
A bit of both. So we had a management team of 4 at Trifork in the Amsterdam office, and 2.5. So we only hired 1, but 2.5 went to the company. Okay. So that was a bit of a bleed for Trifork Amsterdam at the time. Yeah. But fortunately, we had really good people to succeed, both Jeroen and myself, as CEO and CTO. Yeah. Yeah, so we started off with 7 people at the time, and I think 4.5 were from Trifork, and we hired 2 separate, two externals. Right. Yeah.
And now, like, we're still in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis, so we're all working from home at the moment. But AxonIQ is a distributed company by origin, or I don't know exactly how to say it, but you guys started out directly as a distributed company. Was this already when you had the 7 employees? Were you guys already distributed around the world, or was it all still located in Amsterdam?
Yeah, we were distributed throughout Utrecht,
Netherlands.
Amsterdam, and The Hague.
Hey man,
So,
Netherlands is pretty big. Oh wait,
If I remember a quote from Enrique, the Netherlands is not big.
Not at all.
No?
There's, I
Well,
think
it's-
Enrique was complaining about 2 things. There's no places where you're in real danger. And the other one was you cannot get lost in the Netherlands. Yeah. But
you
yeah,
should
so
ask my
we
wife,
were not
but,
very distributed. But when we, I remember, sitting on a bench at Hoofddorpplein in Amsterdam, close to the Trifork office, and having a discussion with Jeroen about, okay, if we build this company, how and what kind of company. And we had already seen, I mean, Elastic, the whole spin out and the first evolution of Elastic that really happened next to us, literally. These guys were for a very long time just one floor below us. So, and we had really good connections with many of their employees because they were former colleagues. So we went there and asked them, how did this distributed way of working work for you? And they said, well, it's amazing because you can still see the areas where we had our early developers. Those areas are commercially much more activated than the other regions because we had an advocate there. We had somebody to build a community, to get the story out.
yeah,
And we thought, okay, we're going to hire people, and wherever we find them, that's where they will work. We're not going to have people come over to the Netherlands or get them grouped together because they live close to somebody else. They will work wherever they want to be, and make the most use of their location instead of seeing it as a problem. Yeah. But the first 7 were
So how
not,
did you deal with
distributed? Yeah.
Oh, I actually didn't know you were distributed. I visited your offices a few times. I didn't know you were distributed back then. But
So you
How do
only
you
saw
deal
a
with
very
salaries?
small part of the company, right?
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, salaries. That's an interesting one. I've been thinking about that one as well. Like, hey, what we do it, how we do it, and is that a smart thing? But generally, we just have individual discussions with people around what do you need to have a good life. That's basically what we want. And I know there's companies saying, yeah, we pay the same salary all over the world.
Yeah.
That might sound very fair. But then, let's say that's $10,000 a month. In some parts of the world, that's hardly a living, and in some parts of the world, you're a rich man, or a woman, right? Is that fair? I don't know. It really depends. So what we do is we like to pay a fair price for wherever that person is, and we have somebody literally this week move from a regular pay area to a high pay area, and she's getting a raise because she's moving back to where she came from, in the US, and that does mean her salary goes up because to get the same quality of life, you need more income there. Well, fine. If that
makes sense.
Well, too bad for us, right? Unlucky us.
I don't know.
Whatever.
Still keep
somebody's
your
part,
person.
and yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And it's always a bit of a tricky discussion because you could also argue: is that person now more valuable because she lives in the US? No, probably not, because we're a distributed company and we don't care where you live. But it's not about the economics from the Axonic side. It's primarily we just want somebody to be able to live a good life and not worry about will I make it till the end of the month with my salary.
Yeah, but you also mentioned that having the people spread around all over the world also makes so that your product gets used all over the world. So I don't know, like maybe now Axon is going to be used more and more in Silicon Valley, or I don't know if it's already highly used there or not. But so maybe it's going to unlock new business for you guys.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a pro in the end. That's a big advantage that we have. But it doesn't mean that we're only hiring people, or that somebody from a, let's say, low-pay region will get more chance of working with us. We look for people that have the right mindset, and then their location just happens to be their location. That's
so
it.
while we're on the topic of like having employees and paying salaries and recruitment and all this kind of stuff, because as a software engineer, you're building a product, you're not really thinking about like 15 years from now I'm going to be doing this kind of stuff, right? Are you super involved with these kinds of issues? Because I can imagine that a lot of the guys or girls listening now is like, yeah, I want to build cool stuff and make a nice company out of it, but all this HR stuff, man, don't even bother me with it.
No, me neither. That's why you hire people, right? Yeah. You do that once, and then then it's gone. It's out of your hands.
Yeah.
So actually, no, I care about technology, and that's why I'm the CTO of this company. And I always tell, when we do introductions, and the CEO is there as well, he always says, yeah, Allard does all the technical stuff, and I do all the stuff that he doesn't want to do. That's
how it works.
That's how it works. Like, and Jeroen is, he's technical in the sense of, understands technology, but he's not a developer.
Yeah.
And that makes it a very good combination because he knows how to hire the right HR people or get the company, keep the company financially healthy, make sure he knows what metrics to watch. Mm-hmm. And then I watch them. And of course, I look at the bank account numbers every now and then to keep me motivated. But no, that's you need to split that. So whoever's listening, and if you have a great idea, make sure you've got the core in the founding team. Make sure that they have the tech guy, but also somebody who has the base concept of what it is to run a company. Side. Yeah. Exactly, because you're going to go crazy if you have to do it all. And there's a lot of companies that have the opposite, right? They have the great ideas, but no ways to actually get it implemented. Yeah. That's not the right way either, right?
Exactly.
And you need everything in the founding team.
And because, I can imagine the advantage of being fully remote, but I can also imagine that you have people working 24/7, basically, right? Like every hour there is somebody across the world committing some code. And do you still code? Do you guys do code reviews on each other? How this process actually goes by?
Yeah, and we actually do a lot of pair programming. The fact that we're in different time zones makes it a bit tricky. Then reviews work better. But even in those different time zones, people tend to pair together with somebody else in the same time zone. I spend some evenings, on calls with colleagues in the West, or get up early in the morning and make sure I speak to some. We don't have colleagues in the East yet. 1 hour East, but that's still doable. Mm-hmm. But we have customers in Australia and New Zealand as well, which gets tricky. So you have to get up early to make sure you catch them in their day. So we do a lot of pair programming, and we just share screen. And nowadays with IntelliJ, there's the Code With Me plugin, which is an absolute breeze.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We helped beta test that a little bit as well at the time, providing feedback. And it's really cool that a product like that they incorporate all the feedback and even more. I mean, we got video nowadays as well. So and that works really well. So people can still work together on a code base and learn from each other. And whenever that's not possible, we do reviews. And if the pull requests get too big, there was this really nice tweet. If you have a 5-line pull request, you get 20 comments. Yeah. If you have a 20-line or 100-line PR, you get thousands of comments. And if you have a 2,000-line PR, you get 0 comments.
Yeah.
So what we do is we do review sessions, and generally people just we just post them on Slack. Say, hey, we're going to do a review session. If you have an opinion, be part of it. Otherwise, shut up. When it's problematic in production, and usually some people show up that really know about certain aspects of whatever has been built, and they can provide good feedback.
And do you still know how to code, or did you forget about how to code?
No, I can still do it. Don't ask me if it's bug free, but no. Of course it's not. Software is never bug free, but no, I have to keep coding, and every now and then I build something, and it's still sometimes for example, the new connector that we built for Axon Server started off as a hobby, quote unquote. I just wanted to know, okay, is there a different way to manage connections? And it was getting really tricky with the reconnects. And I thought, okay, let me just try to build something from scratch. And it ended up being in the product.
The classic mistake, a prototype became production code.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
But does it have tests?
It does, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
That is
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, for example, helping out the IntelliJ guys with some feedback and stuff. So how do you guys gather feedback from developers? Because it's a development tool, a development platform. So you don't really have a lot of contact with the eventual users of the system. So how do you guys gather feedback from the developers? Because they can file issues, but
exactly. Yeah, we don't have a UI where you can just say, "Hey, provide feedback," right? And then you get this form, you type it in, and then you've done it. We should try that though. On the command line, do you have any feedback? Yes or no, and then it blocks the start of your application until you've said whether or not you have feedback.
Exactly, rate us 5 stars.
I'm going to write that one down. And then the rating is the next question. The thing we do is, again, we go to conferences, or used to. Now we stay for conferences. Mm-hmm. But of course, fortunately, we also have customers, so we actually do know who is using it, and we are engaged with them. That is actually a very important source of information for us. So what we do is we have these, developer support is what we call it. And basically a shared Slack channel with all of our paying customers. And that gives their developers straight access to us. But then we can see from the kind of questions that they have, what kind of help they need, where do they struggle. And then we also have discuss.axonic.io, which is basically a forum where people can ask questions. And we monitor those questions to see if there's certain themes that people really care about.
And I'm also a developer, right? So I see sometimes there's open source frameworks, and then you go to issue on GitHub, and there's this huge hate, and this framework sucks, it's shit. Do you guys get the same kind of comments? And if you do, how you deal with them?
Well, we don't get them there, but sometimes I've seen some talk on a Slack environment dedicated to CQRS and DDD, and sometimes you just hear people say, if you use DDD, don't use Axon because it's stupid and it will only lock you in. And I always say you can't win them all, right? Sometimes you see something on Twitter, and it's like, whatever.
It probably hurts though.
Sometimes it's like, I'm spending a lot of time on getting helping people, and the thing that hurts me most is actually just when they say, it's just a one-man show. It's probably worthless. Right? And it's like, how do you mean worthless? Right? There's actually in the Netherlands, there's not much you can do in life without doing something Axon based. Right? If you buy a house, forget it. Probably your mortgage or your definitely the registry of land ownership. It's all Axon based these days. When you go shopping, good luck. Well, unless you go to that other shop. But so there's the proof is out there, and sometimes it just seems that developers are so blindsided with their own correctness, what I do is right and what everybody else is wrong. And that's just the way I interpret it. It's you're not going to convince everybody. If somebody doesn't want to be convinced, they're bad luck. And I'm moving on, focusing on other people. Fortunately, there's a lot of other people that are really excited about what you do. And sometimes you just get an email, just a random email. Today, even I got one after declining somebody for a job application. You get this really lovely email back from them where they say, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this position. Maybe we'll talk in a few years again. I'll just try again. Meantime, keep up the great work. And if you get messages like that, that's where you get the real energy.
Yeah, exactly.
All levels of energy, except the one that the kids draw from. They go back up. So
So what's the project you're most proud of where they're using Axon? I'm not sure if you can tell.
Well, I can tell, but I wouldn't know which one it is. I think it's just the sheer diversity of projects. It's from surgery to there's actually one that I thought was really amazing. There's a company in Belgium, and they basically they cut fabrics into pieces. That's what they do, right? So they order these big rolls of fabrics, and they have these big warehouses, and then their customers buy in some smaller portions of and then those are the interior design companies, so to upholster couches, things like that, clothing as well. And they did a project where they started filing some issues in the issue tracker, and they said, we use lambdas in Amazon, and we noticed that because these connections are relatively short-lived, that there's actually when a lambda executes and it's finished, it pretends to you like it's gone, it's shut down. But in reality, it doesn't. It's still running for 15 minutes, just in case a new request comes. You're not paying for that time, but I guess Amazon does that to make it more efficient for them when the next request comes in. But that was actually problematic for them because the application was paused for 15 minutes. And when it got back up, it would still think, I've got a live connection with Axon server, but the connection was already gone because Axon server just didn't get any replies when it sent messages. So you get this connectivity issue. So they said, in a Lambda environment, it doesn't work. And I said, okay, but what are you doing in a Lambda environment? Why is it so important? And they said, well, there's this new project where they create a digital rendering of all these fabrics. So what they want is a very photorealistic rendering so that designers can actually see what a room looks like when they use certain colors of curtains combined with couches and cushions and whatsoever. But it has to be perfectly realistic. So they have this massive rendering farm on Amazon, and I said, but what does Axon do in there? We don't do anything with rendering. I said, but Axon coordinates all the rendering because there's a few. Well, we need to do, I can't remember the numbers, but like 70 or 100 passes of rendering to make sure that they get to the quality levels where they need to be, using specially designed photos with different light origins to just make everything a proper 3D. And all of that is organized by an Axon application that makes sure that all the levels of rendering happen, and when they're done, that they get into become available in the shop. It's not really one of the projects where I say, project wise, it's that it doesn't change the world, so to say. Yeah. But I would have never expected Axon to be usable in a domain like that. Exactly. And that is something I'm maybe proud is not the right word. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I just realize that sometimes I call it luck, and it pisses my parents off. Because it's not luck, right? Luck is when you find a note on the floor. This is something you've built, you've put energy in. But I always see it as I'm just lucky to put energy in something that eventually becomes something. But then there's also a company in Switzerland that does cancer research. Yeah. And they have doctors look at these massive pictures of microscope pictures of cells to identify cancerous cells in there, and they use the annotations that doctors create in an event-sourced way, so that they have this trail of how did doctors recognize everything, and to learn algorithms to do that as well, improving cancer research in that way. Okay, and it's pretty cool to be somehow part of that, even though you don't actively spend time on those projects. To be part of something that makes the world a slightly better place to live in. Yeah.
So, I mean, these are all pretty positive things, but there has to be some negative sides to the coin as well, right? It can't be all just awesomeness and moonshine and whatever. So what would be a few...
Moonshine?
Well, how do you say? I wanted to say roze geur en maneschijn.
Whoa.
But
moonshine is the booze, right? So it's pretty positive.
I don't know if there's an English version of that saying, but like there has to be some negative points as well, right? Of spinning out the company out of a little framework you made.
To be honest, it hasn't
Very
been that
offensive.
bad yet. I mean, yeah, sometimes you just read these messages, or if you're declined at a conference where you think you really fit, like,
Yeah.
why? Those things happen. We haven't been in a situation where things have gone economically very tricky. There was a time where you just see that. I mean, we're obviously not profitable yet. We were profitable for 2 months in the past, and then our shareholders got onto us like, we're not investing money for you to be profitable right now. You're supposed to not sit on it, but spend it and grow the business. But there was a time where you see that bank account slowly go down. You're like, okay, we need to really convince somebody, right? I spent a lot of time in aircraft, and then when you were in, I was in New York for a conference, and then there's this venture capitalist that we were talking to, and they were in Boston. So you just quickly you book another flight, you just fly into Boston, quickly have a meeting, fly back, just to convince them. And then when for the 50th time you've heard, nah, thanks. It starts to you start to believe like, I'm on a hot air balloon. It's just it's just hot air. There was nothing. It was a stupid idea. Our first VC didn't even see that, and I didn't see it, and it's just plain stupid. Why not stop the whole thing? Fortunately, it didn't get to that point where I thought, okay, well, why not drop everything?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to take a no. That's some
Quite a few,
something
apparently.
I've learned. Quite a few.
Yeah.
But then there's a comparison which I like a lot about when you have an idea and you talk to your boss, and let's assume this very hierarchical corporation. You ask your boss, and if he thinks it's a good idea, great. But then you have to go to his boss or her boss. Doesn't matter. And if one of the people in that chain says no, it's not going to happen, and that's the end of it, right? There's no turning it into a yes. Mm-hmm. But with venture capitalists, there's no hierarchy between them. So you just have a chat with them, and if 50 say no, only one needs to say yes, and then the problem or the product becomes reality.
Yeah.
Or at least that's your responsibility then. But you've at least got the funding to do so. So you have to be able to take some no's and not see them at the end of it, but just see them as a motivation to change your messaging and learn. And you also need to be truthful to yourself and say, okay, if they don't believe my idea, it's not always you that's the problem, right? It just might not be a fit.
Yeah.
It's also probably not them as a problem because they're a VC and they do have investments and they are successful in their own environment.
Yeah.
So it was just not a match, and you always have to take that relative approach. So always don't take a no as the end of it. Take a no as
It's a chance to learn.
move on, just a step, right? Yeah. And that's sometimes quite tricky.
Yeah.
But I think early this year, if I remember correctly, you got a yes.
Yeah, we got a pretty big yes from Axon Venture Partners. Actually, one that we were actually very close to just saying no without even talking to them, because we had. It's really funny how this venture capital world works. Now they're all competing, but they're all communicating with each other. So if one venture capitalist tells you no, there's a big chance that he's telling somebody else, like, hey, I spoke to these guys. They're not for us, but there might be something for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we got, several emails per day of companies, ready to talk to us about an investment. And we had spoken to a couple of corporate investors, right? These big companies that do investments, and that only a very few of those conversations were positive. Very few. Most of them are like, yeah, we're looking if your product fits our suite, and basically they're already lining up for you becoming part of them, and they don't always really understand what you do. And then we thought, okay, this is another one. Insurance company reads about event sourcing. Hey, there's this company doing it. Maybe we can line ourselves up. But fortunately, it was that's not the way the conversation went, and they're not really related. Well, they were founded by the insurance company, but not dependent on them anymore. And they really did their homework, right? So they really understood what we are into, and that we have a market that should grow, and etc. And we were really, really amazed by the types of discussions that we could have with them, because our belief is that for the money, it doesn't matter which investor you have.
Yeah.
I mean, $1 is $1, euro is €1. It doesn't matter. But it's the people that you have to work with. You have to get along with them, because it's an investment is stronger than a marriage. It's easier to get out of a marriage than it is to get out of an investment.
Okay.
So
I get out of a
I do
marriage,
hope your
man. It's
wife
tough.
isn't listening.
sorry.
I got out of a marriage. It was really hard.
Yeah.
So we have an
if
episode
you have
planned,
to
right?
split
Should you
them.
get married or not? And I guess the next episode could also be like, should you get an investor or not?
Exactly.
Good
But
episode.
when you got out of your marriage, did she ask her millions back?
No, because I did not have them.
See, that's the part that makes it really tricky.
I think so.
So it's a strong commitment. So you really want to do your own due diligence as well, and make sure that really match your philosophy, which in COVID times is actually tricky. We did get to meet the investor just once personally. He said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do this size of investment without seeing the founders in person." So he took a Thalys. They're actually based in Paris. So he took a Thalys to Utrecht at the time. We had to send him an invitation letter, otherwise he might not be able to cross the borders.
Okay.
Yeah. And we just met once, and the rest of it is all virtual. Which
That's also nice.
there's investors that told me no, that we've met more in person.
So that's the secret, man. Just meet once.
Maybe that's it. Just
Good first impression, maybe. Yeah. And what's in store for the future then? With this, with a nice investment, is it more product development, or are you guys looking to branch off in other stuff, or what's?
Yeah. So what we definitely want to do is make the life of developers easier.
Okay.
We want to provide them with tools to make sure that the cost and downsides of using event sourcing, which is a very powerful concept, but there's a big downside to it because it's complex, and there's the cost of storage and all of those, the cost of managing all the data. I mean, the storage itself is not cheap, but managing the data becomes tricky. We want to bring that cost down, make that just available at the click of a button, eventually, right?
Okay.
And whatever it is we need to do to make that happen, that's what we will be doing. We don't know how we're going to do that, so I have a vision of where on the horizon I want to be, but I'm not fooling myself that I know how exactly to get there. Yeah. I know which direction we need to move from here, and then we'll see as we go. Truly agile in that way.
And you mentioned Elastic a couple of times as like a spin-off of Trifork, just as AxonIQ. Elastic went to the stock exchange, of course, for quite some money. Is that also something you guys might want to do, or can you not talk about that at all?
Well, it's a future, so I don't have a glass ball, a crystal ball, but it is one of the possible outcomes. It could be that. Eventually you hope to do a good exit. Yeah. And a good exit is not just a commercial one, but I've also seen companies that were acquired by, let's say, companies that I would prefer not to be part of. Yeah. You want to have a partner where that really fits. So recently, Humio was acquired as well, and it's funny because it was a company where. So Humio is the logging company, right? They were part of Trifork as well, founded by the former CTO or former founder of Trifork, now founded Humio, and they were acquired by CrowdStrike. And I'd never heard of that company before. Yeah. And at first glance, you're like, what does a security company need to do with Humio? And I know the guys at Humio, and when you talk to them about it, it's like, that makes perfect sense, of course, and for them as well, because it gives them new direction and an interesting way to go, and then suddenly you see that name everywhere. So it's I don't know what the future will hold. We'll just have to see, and who knows. For now, we're just building our own stuff and doing what we believe in, trying to improve the world of developers one step at a time. So it's one line of code at a time.
So it's safe to assume that you don't want to go back to that old role of developing at a customer and tinkering with a library.
Maybe, but
if it is Axon, yes.
Well, it's one of these things I've been wondering. Like, what? Just imagine you exit this company, and I managed to get myself out of there because that will probably also take a few years. And then what? What would I be passionate about? And so I had a discussion about that with a friend who was even closer to the Elastic starting up, and he said, probably by then you'll just sip some margaritas under a palm tree and then ponder, and then something will come up. Don't worry, something will come up that will keep you busy from there. All right. Worst case, I'll just having a glass of water on the couch on the sofa in my living room. But still, something will come up at some point.
All right. We talked a lot about domain-driven design and event sourcing and CQRS. We did not really talk about that at all. I would love if you would come back maybe in a different episode and maybe talk a bit more about these concepts. For example, in the book Domain-Driven Design by Eric Evans, he talks about strategic and technical DDD. Maybe there's some some nice stuff we can talk about that there as well, because I think it's a super interesting topic as well.
Absolutely, I'd love to. Yeah.
All right. I don't know if you guys have any more questions for Allard or.
In the next episode, I have tons of it. Yes.
It's not going to be a technical support episode, man.
Well, maybe we can make it.
If you can send your questions in advance, I'll make sure I have an answer ready.
Yeah, sounds good. No, it was very nice to catch up with you again and hear the story, the part that I did not know. So that was pretty inspiring, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty cool for sure. All right. Well, if you, the listener, have any other questions for Allard or for us, then you can always send it to anchor.fm/4scouts or send us an email at podcast@4scouts.nl. Allard, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And AxonIQ actually have a podcast of their own as well, right? I don't know if you want to plug it here because we have so many listeners. It's gonna double your listening rate, I think.
Yeah, there's a podcast. If you, I think it's on Spotify, Podbeans. It's on Apple Podcasts. If you just look for AxonIQ, I don't have any URLs ready. Probably axoniq.io/podcast will work, and there will be a lot of Axon-related discussions by a colleague of mine with several people from our own company as well as from the industry.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Pretty cool. Well, thanks a lot. I guess, Sylvester, I don't know if you have anything else to add or to ask.
No, man, I really like the conversation. I liked hearing the background story. I'm trying to remember how we first got in touch with Axon. I seem to remember the Google Code project, but I honestly don't remember how we found it. So maybe I need to go through my email archives. Other than that, lots of cool advice. And maybe one last question is, what advice would you give to a developer, Rolf, perhaps, on how to build your own company? What would he or she need to do?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short. But some advice for if you have an idea, just share it with a few people that can validate your idea. Be critical in the sense of don't lash onto it. If people tell you it's not a good idea, it might mean it's not a good idea. It might also mean they don't understand that you need to work on your messaging. So it's really difficult to find out whether it's a good idea or not. Don't take no as the end. I guess that's the most important piece of advice. And when you really get to finding a company, try to found that company with people that are not exactly like you.
Yeah.
Make sure you get different people on board because there's already a you, and one of you is enough. So try to find somebody else because that will give you a bit of friction. But it's friction that makes a car move.
Yeah. So for sure.
I guess that's
Cool.
the most
I like
important
that, Danny.
advice that I can give.
All right. Yes. Well, and on that note, thank you again, Allard, for being here, and we'll invite you for a new episode if you have time. And catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows, with your host, Rolf Surd. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit forscouts.nl and on Twitter @forscouts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows.